We had lots of breakout sessions today, so maybe some of you participated in them, and if you were watching from home, you didn't get to see them. So now we have the opportunity to learn some of the key takeaways from these discussions. So I'm going to welcome back up on stage Stefan Peters, the CEO of Accelerating Impact, who's going to invite some of these people up on stage. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're delighted to share some of the highlights of today's breakout sessions. As many of you, obviously, as just mentioned, weren't able to attend. So these breakout sessions were groups of 20, 30 participants sitting together in a more intimate setting over about 90 minutes to discuss more deeper topics and share with elements. So in the morning, we explored a range of topics on the gender-climate nexus, fund structuring, decarbonization of semiconductors, and mobilizing of private capital. And in the afternoon, the sessions continued on climate adaptation, blended finance, and nature and biodiversity finance. So I'll be asking each of the moderators of these sessions to kind of summarize a few key takeaways of each of these sessions. Just to start it off, I'll actually bite the bullet on this one. Adrien Rollet and Hugo Vautier from Opportunity Financial Services could not attend this session. They held a breakout session around fund setup and structuring in Luxembourg, and they were kind enough to brief me on the main key points that they had. So a couple of key takeaways. They had three elements. Was that setting up a fund in general is expensive and complicated, especially so in Luxembourg. I've heard somebody quote me that Luxembourg is like the Rolls-Royce of fund jurisdictions, very expensive but high quality. So what we're also seeing in the market is that there's an increasing number and intensity of regulations, and the barriers keep going up. It's going to be more and more difficult for people to raise a fund because the cost basis is just simply higher. Now, that brings us to the second point, where there's a lack of promotion and knowledge of different types of structures that are available for smaller fund managers who are looking for this. So, for instance, there's the registered partnership, but there's also European fund regimes like EUVECA and EUSEF that would actually be able to be applied, but they're not very well known in general. A last point that was discussed as well, that a lot of regulations for fund managers based in Europe are rigorously applied to fund managers based here, but when we're talking about fund managers coming from outside of Europe and raising funds in Europe, it's a bit patchy on how it's actually being maintained. And there's a lot of, it's a bit of an unfair advantage for the fund managers outside of Europe to actually have this and be able to fundraise much easier, even though they're not necessarily complying. So it comes really to the main point that we really need more affordable and disseminated knowledge around the different funds that we have available in Europe in general, especially for smaller fund managers, which makes it even more applicable so to impact funds, because they tend to be smaller at this point in time as well. So that brings us to the second breakout session, which was led by Maud Bonnet and Camille Huret from Beyond Finance. If I can ask them to come up to the stage. They were discussing leveraging on women to achieve climate resilience, the new frontier of impact investments.
So, thank you, Stefan. In substance, we discussed the fact that women are a very important lever to achieve climate adaptation. They are deeply affected by the effect of climate change, but they are not only victims, and I think that's the main takeaway. They are also pioneers in adoption of products for climate adaptation. They are influencers for their community and family, and they are trailblazers in adopting solutions. Now, it looks like an opportunity, but how do you really capture it? How do you tie up in a convincing theory of change these two factors, women and climate, and that's really the challenge for many investors. We discuss the fact that to complex challenge, we need actually complex solutions. Blended finance being one of them, with all the possible toolbox that goes with blended finance, technical assistance, junior tranche, KPI linked loans, to drive a change and achieve climate adaptation. We call for action, and in substance it was being brave, being bold, being innovative, needing more funding, needing more initiative like IFF, to which we are grateful. And maybe I'll finish with a note, as Camille and I were accelerated by IFF last year, and we are deeply grateful for this. And we announced yesterday, so it's fresh off the press, a partnership with the Grameen Foundation Crédit Agricole, I'm not sure they are in the room anymore, to drive climate adaptation for women, by women, with women. So.
Thank you so much, Maud. Our next breakout session was led by Cyril Arnaud and with Mervyn Chaumier from Aniston Capital. If we could ask Mervyn to come up and share a couple of keynotes. This was around mobilizing private capital at scale in non-OECD countries.
Thank you, Stephen. So the main conversations and key takeaways out of this roundtable was that despite all the announcements in terms of capital flow towards the non-OECD countries, we see that it's still pretty low. And multiple figures have been sent around, be it the 4 trillion that is needed for achieving the SDG targets, or even in our own activities more around renewable energies, 1 trillion per year needed in sub-Saharan Africa, which is basically 7-fold away from what is needed. It is clear that the mobilization of private capital is needed next to public capital. Now, obviously, that conversation led into the role of DFIs, where clearly DFIs are still dominant and still needed, but there are some alignment that needs to happen in order to attract more private investors. We're talking here probably of an arbitrage between the policy requirements of DFIs to recognize that those policy requirements yet needed may need to be decomplexified or simplified in order to make it easier for private investors, institutional investors, or corporate investors to digest them. So that was a part of that conversation that led into the actors are around the table right now. How do we expand that pool in order to attract more? So we explored during that session corporate investors on the one hand, and also explored other avenues on how to attract those investors. So corporate investors, the main takeaway around attracting corporate investors is the number one, they act as strategic investors, and number two, they provide also expertise to the different managers or type of instruments that are working towards mobilizing capital. New actors, we spoke about that as well. Probably not enough work is done towards attracting non-OECD institutional investors. I'm talking here of probably pension funds from sub-Saharan Africa or Asia that could also play an important role and key role into complementing public financing in those countries. And last but not least is human capital. And that part is end-to-end. At all levels, there's a need to beef up human capitals, be it, for instance, we were talking earlier of non-OECD pension funds. Their investment teams need to be beefed up to understand alternative investments. Their trustees as well would need to be engaged. There are others who are very well in advanced and have the teams, but if we want to maximize and reach out for the full pool, that is also needed. And similar human capitals at GP level and at corporate level also needs to be beefed up. So that's somehow in a nutshell of the fruit of our discussion of our roundtable.
Thank you, Mervyn. So the fourth breakout session this morning was held by Dan Chun of Cycle Group. If I could ask Dan to come up. He was talking around deep tech and semiconductors, the bedrock of sustainable growth.
Hello. So my unstructured synopsis of our discussion. So we had a variety of people and opinions in the room. But as a conclusion, investments in venture capital are skewed. Some investments basically absorb all of the gains that are made. And the highest returns and most valuable companies are, and that was kind of a consensus also, in defendable IP-rich deep tech companies, especially in semiconductors on the tail end, or on the back of this, also software and AI, currently visible in the highest valuations. And we talked a bit about how this comes and why. We are moving away from fossil fuels, and I think we're missing kind of a huge opportunity in that space when it comes to the semiconductification and the electrification of our economies. Europe, and that was an interesting view by my fellow panelist, Europe is at the forefront of material research, science and engineering, but at the back of, and the tail end of commercializing and scaling these technologies. And we're kind of missing the connection there. Just to give you a couple of numbers that we discussed, the global semiconductor industry is growing by 10% to $1 trillion annually, total addressable market in 2030. The power electronics part of this is projected much slower, and I predict that it's going to happen much faster. It's a very exciting time to be alive. We try to kind of explain and discuss why this happens, why so few of us are aware of what's happening in advanced semiconductors. All of us know Moore's law, Swanson's effect, so the exponential growth of semiconductors and solar. Maybe also some of us are familiar with LED growth, battery growth, EV. But at the tail end of this, I think the conclusion of our discussion was that this is just the beginning. At the moment, still, most of our energy needs come from the fossil fuel industry, and the transition to electrification and to semiconductification of the industries has just begun, and that is probably the biggest opportunity of our lifetime. Now, about Luxembourg, just to conclude. I think in Luxembourg we concluded that we take strange risks in Luxembourg. It has, of all the countries I've been in, one of the highest rates of drunk driving, which I oppose very, very much. And somehow people are afraid of taking risks that can outperform the risks they take by huge payouts. And I don't know why. So the message was, don't drunk drive, and take your feet off the brakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So the last breakout session we had this morning was around social impact finance. If I could ask Paola Caviccioli to come up. They were talking about unlocking entrepreneurial opportunities and addressing gender-specific challenges in emerging markets.
So it was interesting today because we were all agreeing on the fact that investing in women is an opportunity, an economic opportunity, and also an opportunity to get impact results, outsized impact results. Still, the shortfall in women financing is estimated at 320 trillion worldwide, billion? I can't remember, but something like that. So why is it so difficult for a women entrepreneur, women fund managers, and women-led companies to access finance, be it equity, loans, or investment in the fund? Probably, so we discussed this with the men who were in the room, and the conclusion was that there are a number of root causes for this situation. The first one being that culturally, women have a way of marketing themselves and being which is very different from men. A woman who's not sure about something will simply say, I don't know. Rarely do we have men that come out in a room professionally and say, I don't know about something. So women are not afraid of showing their insecurity, which actually is something which lead to a higher risk perception. I mean, to the perception that women-led companies and enterprises have a higher risk. So the risk is often perceived as higher, whereas in reality, women-led companies often perform better. Even women loans have a lower non-performing rate. And there are a lot of research that underpin the fact that investing in women is actually a good investment from an economic point of view. So what were the trends that we are observing, the trends in the last years of us on the ground that work with women entrepreneurship and women-led fund? So the good news is that we have more and more women who actually set up funds or lead microfinance institutions and who actually work with financing women. So it's interesting to see that these women fund managers, that's what I work with most, have difficulties raising funds because often they are first-time funds. So first-time funds have a higher barrier to accessing and getting to a close at a sizable amount of commitments. But more and more we have blended finance coming in to support these funds, and we also see that there are associations of women getting together to support women, because finance is only one part of it. There is also access to TA, to technical assistance, and particularly to education about financial literacy and also access to networks. So there are quite a few ingredients which are needed in order to really support women in the way they need to be supported, not only with financing, but also with technical assistance and other kind of support. So we came to the conclusion also that one of the problems is not only that women have difficulties marketing themselves, but also that women put barriers, and probably this comes from education and cultural and the way we are educated. We put barriers to what we think we can learn or what we think we know. So that is something that needs to be overcome. And also what needs to be overcome is also the unconscious biases that the whole society has about women. So we spoke about a lot of things. It's difficult to summarize it today, but I think the message that we wanted to convey is to all the investors is invest in women investors. So if we have local investors in the countries, in the emerging markets and here, that they need to be supported in order to really scale the gender lens investment. And it's important to also support the first-time funds that are founded and led by these women. It is very important for DFIs to refuse to invest in teams that are not diverse. Diversity in a team is very important. Most women-led funds have men in the teams and as partners. And we do see that a lot of DFIs don't want to invest anymore in funds that are only men, have only men investors and partners in them. So I think that's it that we had. I had a piece of paper, but it got lost somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Now we're moving on to the afternoon breakout sessions. The first one, Timothy Rand from Mercy Corps Ventures and Ellie Turner from 60 Decibel held a breakout session around measuring climate adaptation and resilience, the risks and impacts. Ellie, Tim, can I ask you to come up? It's just you, all right?
Hi everyone, is that too loud? My name is Ellie Turner and I'm the head of agriculture for 60 Decibels. We are a social impact measurement company. If you're not familiar with us, the name of the company, 60 Decibels, is the volume of human conversation, and that's because we believe that listening to people is the best way to measure social impact, and that's what we do. So in this session, the key takeaway was really just that resilience is extremely complicated, and it means different things in different places, and it can have can appear in unexpected ways that are maybe hard to measure. So we started with Tim from Mercy Corps Ventures explaining their resilience framework. Mercy Corps Ventures is we'll see if I get this right. It's a venture fund that does seed and early stage ventures, and he really explained sort of the resilience framework that they've developed that has helped them sort of define what resilience means and then help them decide if a potential portfolio company meets their criteria of resilience, and if so, how. And then I went on to explain the resilience impact measurement methodology that we've developed at 60 Decibels and shared some results from the first 33 companies in agriculture that we used the tool with over the course of 2023. Shared a couple of insights and then shared where we're going next with the tool, which is to make it more sector agnostic and a little bit leaner, but still really grounded in that human voice and the perspectives of an individual to really reflect on if a product or service has changed their resilience to climate change. And then we had a breakout activity where we gave some examples of potential investee companies, and we broke out and sort of we applied the Mercy Corps Venture framework for resilience to sort of determine if a company met the criteria for resilience, what the resilience impacts might be. And they were really great examples that sort of forced you to think outside the box and think outside of what we normally think of as resilience and really get curious about how a company could build resilience and of whom they might be building that resilience and what might need to be true for them to build resilience. And then we got a little bit into how we might measure those impacts. So it was really fun. So thanks everyone for their engagement in this session. And that's it.
Thank you, Ellie. Our second breakout of the afternoon was led by Willem Grimmink, around unlocking green capital with blended finance. Willem, can I ask you to come up?
Thank you. That was a great session, and I also enjoyed the session I participated in before about financing in no OECD countries. We talked about blended finance based on, I start off with my experience in Nepal and Bangladesh, and the structures we have built there. And then we had a conversation around the risks, pros and cons of the two models. And I think first takeaway is really that when you build blended finance models, you really need to look very good at in what kind of environment you are. And I think every model is a function of that environment. And the way we looked at it was, okay, in this environment, what are the gaps that we need to plug to make it work, but also what are the partners to do it with? So who is naturally an ally in this financing structure? Another takeaway to me was that we talked a lot about governance. So these structures, how are they managed, and what is the risk in managing such structures? And it was really good actually to have also that feedback on the model that we created. Comment that came back a couple of times was investors like plain vanilla. Yeah, and blended finance is not necessarily plain vanilla. You blend in multiple sources of capital, and that is also putting a burden on the governance of such a structure. There's also cost involved, although costs can also be supported by technical assistance or grant programs. Another comment that was made is that by working with multiple sources of financing into a fund brings also expertise, brings also capacity to plug those gaps in the environment. But really, who is a fund manager, or what does a fund manager need to look like to manage it, and do we have the right skills to offer? What else did I want to say about it? Yeah, if you, I also asked a question: how would blended finance, is that a trend? Is it something that comes and go? But my understanding was that the participant thought that it was already here for so many years, so it's probably here to stay. And it's up to us also to use it properly and to sell it to our investors. There was another point of building blended finance within a fund or put it outside the fund. I hope you can relate to that. I don't want to dig in too much in it, but what I see in the model that we use, we have also financing streams that are not incorporated into the fund, so they exist outside that fund. And then the question becomes how to share the risks in an investment. And there were quite a couple of good ideas on how to balance that risk and share it within that universe of the fund. Last point I will make relates a bit to what can be blend into an investment, but it's really outside the fund. It's what we see, the corporate investors, especially in the work that we do in Bangladesh. We work in the garment industry, put solar on their rooftops. We work with the brands. They have an interest in financing, and it's really interesting for us to see, okay, how do you bring in those corporates into the financing mix? We looked at, for example, corporate guarantees, but also something like impact-linked finance, and we had a discussion around that. So, to summarize it, I think there are a lot of models, blended finance models out there, and there's a lot we can learn from each other. At the end of the day, it goes back, I guess, to mobilizing private capital. But the fact that these parties coming together with one goal, I think that's really something that also will eventually have an impact on the fund managers' capability and the way they governance the model. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Willem. So last but not least, we had one breakout session around why nature and biodiversity finance will become the top priority of impact investors, which will be done by Arno Gillen from Impact. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good evening. So we went on a trip. So we were about 35 people. We were obviously the most interesting session of the whole afternoon, so sorry for the ones that didn't attend. So we got out of the building and we went into the forests of Luxembourg. From there we went to Faroe, as Femke said, in the Faroe Island, to see the seaweed company they've invested in. From there we dove into the Belize Island and saw the marine protected areas that are invested by Outrigger Fund. From there we went to Madagascar and see what our friends from America are doing in practice. And we discussed with the team of Big Valley. So we went really into the concrete thing of what biodiversity is. As we discussed, it's a bit of an odd thing to talk about biodiversity while you are in a building like this today, instead of sitting in the forest and talk about this and seeing it in practice. And that's what I was discussing with Emmanuel from Mariacap at the end. We all need to go into the nature to actually feel it and stop talking in our building like that about the thing. So it needs to come from the ground, and I think that's the first thing that come out of this session. Let's all go back into the forest so that whenever we talk about diversity finance, we know what we talk about. So, and what we discovered through this trip onto this various very interesting projects is that first, biodiversity is diverse, obviously, because this is the nature of biodiversity, means that it's complex, because it's not like one KPI fits all, equivalent of CO2. You have numerous KPIs, and if you don't have numerous KPIs, it means that you have a problem, because you don't tackle correctly what the biodiversity is about. Even one person just said from Habitats Foundation that just on a mountain, if you go down from the mountain from 100 meters altitude, then the KPIs must be different. You need to tackle this differently. So it's complex, it's diverse, and it's location specific. Whereas CO2 is the same everywhere, we have the same atmosphere. Here, we need to be really tailoring our projects, our way of investment, our KPIs to the specificities of each and every of these projects. So if it is diverse, if it is complex, if we have all of these, let's say, hurdles, which makes it very interesting, how could you get institutional investors, private investors to go into that? That's a discussion we had in the morning around how do we mobilize capital markets. They need simple thing. They need plain vanilla aspect. They need to replicate things. And here you come up with something saying, guys, this is the future. This is what you need to invest in, but this is complex. Every time it's different. You always need to learn and to understand all of this. So basically, it's a kind of an impossible thing. The good thing for us is that it's a no-brainer in the sense we have to. We have to solve this, not because we feel it's cool, it's nice to be in the nature, but we need nature. There's a social and biodiversity interdependence. If we don't solve the problem of nature and biodiversity, we will not eat in the future. And the climate crisis will become a food security crisis. 75% of all our food production is based on pollination. You don't have bees, you don't eat simply. If you don't have nature, you are not healthy. 50% of our medicines are coming from nature. So if you don't have a healthy nature, you die, basically, due to that. So basically, the interdependence between the social problem and the biodiversity problem is just one. So that's why one person was just explaining a project where when the local people in Madagascar started to understand that they can actually have business through nature projects, they will start protecting the nature. And so one impact the other, and so on and so forth. So you can see it as a virtuous circle or virtual circle. We want to see it as a virtuous circle, obviously. So once this is set, okay, we need it. So where the money is coming from. So usual suspects of impact investors, they are there. Public institution, they are here. Governments, they are here to help us to invest into that because it's complex. So we will need concessional money. We will need blended finance to actually support all these, let's say, learning journey we're going to. We need to measure, we need to monitor, we need to report, we need to monetize. That's what we were saying. We need to put a value on nature as such. And people understand that if you protect a forest, if you protect land, it is increasing in value. So we need to put nature on our balance sheet and forget about our economical way of looking at things in terms of cash flows. If I discount my cash flow, this is my value. Nature is not about that. So we need to really tweak that, and there are some initiatives that are around that. So this is one aspect. We need blended finance. The good thing is also that there will be a big push from regulation. Again, thanks to government, European Commission, and we have the CBD pushing everyone to commit to protecting 30% of land, restoring, unfortunately, 20, not 30 in Europe, but still 20% of land in Europe, investing into, well, reducing the subsidies into harmful products and economies. So regulation is really coming here at the government level, but also at the corporate level. Thanks to CSRD, so the new directive whereby corporates will have to transparently disclose whether they are harming not only the carbon aspect, but also the nature and the biodiversity, then we'll see who's the bad guy in the room, and these guys will have no choice than first to reduce and then to look for nice projects to finance, to kind of counterbalance, not offsetting, but counterbalancing what they're doing. So there will be corporates, in addition to the investors, that will be ready and interested to actually contribute to these maybe more technical, more difficult way of investing. So the stars are coming all together for biodiversity finance, but still we have a lot to learn, still we have a lot to work on. As I said, measurement, monitoring, monetizing, this is one big thing. The other thing is about obviously promoting and learning. I had one person explaining we need to train investors, we need to train project developers, we need to train DFIs, governments, etc. We need to train each of us here in this room to understand really concretely what is biodiversity finance, what we need to do. Because it's just starting. We are in this very nascent industry. So it's a very good opportunity for all of us first to learn ourselves and then helping the others to get there. So I think, yeah, the good thing is that there's a lot of innovation. Payment for ecosystem services models are existing. They've been tested for many years. We're going on and on. So we start to build a track record. We're not yet at there like renewables are, obviously microfinance, social inclusion are, but we are getting there. Biodiversity credits are coming, conservation trust funds. So there's technical instruments innovating to actually capture and make it this very complex thing, which is biodiversity, a bit more easy to support. So that's the good thing. What we need to be careful is, as always, the washing issue impact or risk, the biodiversity washing here. So we discussed, and Mauricio from Big Valley said, when I market my fund to corporates, I talk about agroecology. I don't talk that much of biodiversity because these guys, they're really scared about the risk of biodiversity washing. We are so new into the measurement and monitoring that we cannot just already foresee what actually will be the positive biodiversity impact. It's not that we don't trust that we will do it, it's just that we don't have the track record. So these people are really about scared. That's why we need to have strong collaboration, partnership with universities, with specialists, with project developers, with citizens, with people on the ground to make it work, to really make it a trustworthy or impact or biodiversity-worthy sector. So all of this calls for partnership, collaboration, innovation, a lot of new actors. And just to circle back and give it back to the ICFA and WISFA, well, that's basically what we want. We need more actors. What I really liked in our panel, it was that actually we had 4 accelerated fund managers that were just showcasing what they are doing. So it shows exactly, and thanking the whole team of the ICFA and now the ISFA, because as I said, social and biodiversity are just 2, that we need all these actors. So we need more. And we all took note for next year to have a much longer panel of 2 or 3 hours next year, being on a big room like this, where we will all talk about biodiversity finance. Thank you very much.